This episode is brought to you by Troxel Plus membership. Learn about the benefits of membership and get your limited time launch offer savings at trxl.co/launch20. There's no spaces in that. trxl.co/launch20. This episode of Troxel is supported by Confluence, a small conference event for AEC professionals and technology providers to discuss industry trends and ideas together. It's put on by the fine folks at Avail. You can learn more about the upcoming invite-only events during this episode. This episode of Troxel is supported by Avail. Avail helps AECO firms better manage, organize, and navigate information faster. Visit getavail.com today. Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. In this episode, I welcome Carey Balogh and Lauren Genest. Carey is the founder and CEO, and Lauren is president and partner at Brand Groupies. In this episode, we discuss their unique SO-PR approach. What's that, you ask? It's their branded approach that combines social media and PR to fuel brand recognition, storytelling, and personality-driven strategy in the AEC industry in a media landscape driven by social media, PR, brand recognition, and storytelling. We also talk about Brand Groupies' background in fashion and how looking at AEC through that lens has informed their approach and services. So while this conversation is a bit of a tangent to the typical conversation here on the podcast, we can't ignore how technology in the social media sphere is also evolving the profession of architecture. So I hope you enjoy hearing from these two experts in the field. And without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Carey Balogh and Lauren Genest. Carey and Lauren, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you today.
Thank you, Evan.
Thanks for having us.
So we're going to talk about you today and Brand Groupies. And this is a bit of a departure maybe from the typical content on the show, but I have been branching out into a little bit of business of architecture content on here because there are things beyond technology that weave into how we get work done and how we attract new work even. And I think that's kind of where you guys come in. And so things have changed majorly in my career span in this space. And you guys have coined a term called, I don't know, how do you say it? What do you say? SO-PR?
SO-PR.
Okay.
PR. I've got it. You nailed it.
All right. So PR and social and marketing and PR and promotion. And you've coined this new term. And wow, architects, I think in general, kind of suck at this. And so I'll just say that in the beginning, which is promoting ourselves is typically, I think, I could say it two different ways. We're not good at promoting ourselves in this. And so technology now plays a big part in this, which is everybody's connected. And there's algorithm-driven feeds out there where content shows up in my timeline and it's different than your timeline. But through our kind of extended networks, these things kind of, take on a life of their own. And there's not architects, there aren't engineers who are really leveraging this in any measurable way or meaningful way. Mm-hmm. And then there's the other side, which is when firms do post stuff, it's like, check out this award we won. And I don't think that they're really connecting with their audience because they're actually just, I think that's really inside the echo chamber of architecture AEC, which is like patting ourselves on the back so that others in the field will see that. And so I get there's a little bit of value there, but I don't think there's a lot of value there. And there's a lot of awards to be won out there. There are tons and tons of awards. And so it's like, okay, and what is the true value of an architect? What is the true value of an engineer in the built environment? And how do we tell that story? So I think storytelling is the key thing that we should start off talking about today. But before we do that, Brand Groupies, can you just, I've already introduced you in the intro, but I would love to hear your version of it that's not written down and just give us kind of a backstory on how Brand Groupies became a thing and then what you do.
Well, Brand Groupies was founded in 2015 And at the time, we were doing anything and everything, PR, social media, websites for a range of different clients. And then it was in 2017 when we started working with Mancini Duffy and landed an architecture and design firm in New York City. So we started doing social media. That led to PR, that led to personal branding for the president, that led to a podcast. And once we got a taste of the AEC industry, we said, this is awesome. We saw a gap. We came from the fashion industry, so we saw major opportunity in this industry. And so we really evolved Brand Groupies. And today we do social media, public relations, personal branding, and podcast management for commercial architecture firms, engineering firms, construction firms, design, and real estate. So we're all in.
You're in the building industry. I think that's so interesting, from like allowing you to focus on the AEC landscape, but you're really focused only on that. And what's interesting to me is that you came from fashion. There's always obviously a fashion component to architecture, right? And it's I'm not just talking about what people wear, even though that is I'm wearing the architectural uniform today. I'm wearing black, right?
In the class.
but the idea of fashion and architecture and aesthetics and emotions and mood and things like that, I think are all kind of wrapped up in why we do what we do, because these buildings, these landmarks, these libraries, these homes, like they make an indelible mark on people to be the people that they are in society. And so it's interesting to kind of hear how all that mixes together. So let's talk about this PR aspect of architecture and the idea of self-promotion and communicating value of architects. And I think like we'll keep trying to tie it back to tech, which I think is kind of it's just we take it for granted that we all have these devices on our desks and in our pockets that can enable us to do this. And yet there's still this chasm of information out there about architects. Like you have to go to a website, you have to look at all the projects and look at all the specifications of the project. But how does it make me feel? Like even architects aren't very good at communicating that kind of stuff on their website. But from your perspective, give us an overview of the industry and where it sits, because I assume this is where you see opportunity in what you're doing.
Yeah, I think we see so much opportunity for brands who actually, make the investment and really see the value to stand out, because so many people within this design community, it's all design led. And I think that's how we got here from fashion. I think that we really see such an opportunity for those who really, I think, sort of become the early adopters in this realm, because this isn't something that traditionally has been budgeted for in the AEC industry. There wasn't, we always say in the fashion industry, Carey would work at an agency, I'd work at an agency. One of us was going to get hired, but it wasn't a matter of if you would get hired. It was just which one were you going to select for PR, and then as the years went on, social media. But in this industry, that doesn't seem to be the case. And so I think our clients, we tend to gravitate towards clients that think differently and that are doing it a bit differently, because I think they're already adopting other habits within the industry that probably aren't very traditional or typical. And that's how I think we become partners, because and then once they adopt our SOPR approach, we really sort of take an in-house approach. We have a handful of clients. The ultimate goal is to work across several different services with them. And then we really, once we get to know them well, they kind of let us run. They don't have people internally that can manage or kind of do our same skill set. So they're really kind of investing in this higher level design aesthetic that we can protect their brand. I do the PR, Carey does social. So we always, we both came from PR background. And so I think making sure that you're taking a quality over quantity approach has always been sort of very at the forefront of our minds. And in the fashion industry, we were always several seasons ahead. So we were always looking to the future. What's next? What's coming up? Threads just launched the other day. Of course, Carey on
That's right.
Thursday was scrambling to get everybody on Threads. And
We have to
so
talk
it's,
about that.
you know, just,
Yes.
we'll have to talk about that, but it's constantly just staying ahead of the curve.
Mhm.
And I think you nailed it. Telling the stories from a PR perspective, and then Carey on social is so integral to what we do.
Yes.
And I think we're really people driven when it comes to our PR approach. And really kind of that came back to our fashion roots of dissecting the stories behind the brands. And then how can you make that connection with your audience? How can you bring that to life so that people want to work with you? People work with people, not necessarily brands. So that's kind of what you're buying into.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They say a brand is what other people think of you, what other people say about you, not what you say
Exactly.
internally about yourself. Right.
Yeah, I know
And so how do you know
That's-
what people are saying about you if you're not engaged in these? I mean, there's clients that are already paying you to do a thing that may say or may not say. They might openly talk to you about things you're excelling at and things you're deficient at. They might not be. They might be saying those in a private room. And so it's interesting to me how social enables anybody to say anything about. It's just open forum, right?
Yeah,
There's
sure.
no, and in some way people feel a little bit of protection there. So they maybe say more than they should, or they
Yes.
like, it's
Going
kind of
rogue.
like, well, I used to live in Southern California, right? And you sit in traffic and you see the road rage happen because it's safe to be in that car and I'm separate from
Yes.
everybody else. And that's kind of what's happened. We've seen play out in many instances on social media, but at the same time, you can also get really honest feedback. Like there was this whole thing that kind of opened my eyes, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, about what part of your project is Instagrammable, right? Like where are people taking their photos in front of your project? Not what you think are the right ways to look at your project as an architect, but what are the people who are using those spaces? Where are they doing that? And I think that was just kind of an interesting shift in design mentality. It's like, oh, I guess I should be thinking about that, or at least watching it play out to kind of understand what people are indirectly saying about your project, because they're taking their picture in front of it. They're not actually maybe even writing words about it.
Yes.
So give architects a grade. Where are we as a group in the social media space as far as are we any good at this at all? I know we're at the lower end of the scale.
I know. Well, it's, to Lauren's point about, the fashion and the high standards, we look back and, every touch point had to be on brand. We were trained in, 360-degree branding. So, everything was to evoke, emotion. So I think, when we entered into this industry, it was like, oh my gosh, everyone's so excited about a building evoking emotion and this and that. And, even the technology, but it was like, oh my goodness, the PR and social was not in this, aligning. So we were shocked. When I first entered, I said, oh, these are architects, these are designers. They must be ahead of the trends, because look at how far along they are, in these buildings that will, last for centuries. And so it was a shocker. And then we realized that, people did start to catch up. But I think as far as a grade goes, it's, definitely not an A. Definitely.
Although it's funny with the AEC, it's funny. We just had somebody on our podcast a few weeks ago, and she was in the C. And she said it's funny, the A usually adopts first, and then comes the E. The engineers do it, and the construction realm is usually last. So you're not last.
No.
In technology, I think I guess you could say it that way too, but I also see a lot of construction adoption of technology because time is money. They really understand delivering the real product to the people and handing over the keys and what it takes to get there, and all the gotchas that go in there, and looking actively for ways to solve for those issues that come up. And architects are like always, I think, later adopters when it comes to that stuff, not leaders for sure. I think we can all agree to that. At least the audience who listens to this show, I think, painfully know how slow our industry is to adopt technology. So I don't think it's any different here.
This episode is made possible with support from Avail. What's one of the most painful aspects of working in Revit today? Well, we all know that as a Revit project grows over time, navigating the information in that project becomes ever more taxing. And when more than one person is working on a project, a new wave of challenges arise. It only gets more difficult throughout the life of a project. Good news, a huge update to Avail Desktop was just released. Version 4.5 introduces several powerful new features designed to improve organizing, searching, and finding information within Avail. New features include channel groups, application mappings, and scope searches. But that's not all. Let's talk about the all-new Project Navigator, a powerful new feature in Avail for Revit 5.1 that extends Revit's native project browser to help navigate the dense information you're forced to endure as your projects grow. For the first time, Avail will connect your active project to your standard library with one unified search box. With Project Navigator, you can easily switch between active projects, see recently viewed Revit elements, search across all Revit project elements, yes, all of them, conveniently search Avail with one click, filter by all the different element types, navigate to sheets and views, legends and schedules, view individual elements contained on sheets and navigate to them, view family types, and more importantly, actually drag and drop them right into your project, view instances of each family type currently being used in the model, and more. To read all about the new features and see a video of them in action, visit getavail.com. There you'll find a features pull-down menu, and you can look at all of the different features, including the new Project Navigator. Once again, that's getavail.com, and look in the bar across the top for that features pull-down menu. Thank you to Avail for supporting this episode of Troxel.
Yeah.
You mentioned Threads a minute ago, and so as we record this podcast, it's been out for, I don't know, a few days, right? It's not that long, and like incredible growth. Obviously, totally leveraging the Instagram social graph, and you automatically basically follow everyone who is already in your list on Instagram, and time will tell whether the Instagram audience has any appetite for text versus, I mean, obviously you can attach photos to your thread, but it's a very different feel, totally taking advantage of kind of the stuff that's going on over at Twitter as well. So people are looking for alternatives. So kind of, I think what I heard was it launched about a month earlier than they were anticipating, but really based on circumstances that Twitter was dealing with. And like, let's take advantage of this. Can we launch early? Yes, we can launch early. Let's do it. And then boom, everybody's on Threads, in air quotes. I don't know if everybody's on Threads, but tell us your experience with that and what you're telling your clients about Threads. Because social media management is like, really, one more thing? There's always room for one more thing, right? Ugh.
Well, I think, when we say, we're ahead of the trends with technology and our clients, we have to stay ahead in every aspect. So, of course, we jumped on Thursday night late, we commiserating with all the social media managers who are just up to all hours and figuring it out. Like, oh my gosh, to access all your accounts, you have to log out, log back in, and just all those little intricacies to figure it out. And I think there's a lot of, social listening to happen. I definitely think it's great to jump in right away, but you also want to make sure that you have some sort of strategy and make sure that you're adding value and what you are posting is really in line with the app. You can't just repurpose from other apps. You have to reword things. You can repurpose, but of course, every social app and platform has their own style and voice. So we've been definitely posting. We're definitely seeing what's out there. 50% is reading about it. People are already posting strategies. And you're like, how are you, an expert in less than a week?
Good guess.
So I think it's being a little bit, vulnerable, seeing what is out there and what makes sense for your brand, and if it doesn't make sense, we have to measure the ROI on it and really, put together a strategy moving forward. But for now, it's actually been fun to play around with it and see what's working, what's not.
I wanted to, there's obviously a lot of desire for features to make it kind of feature parity with other social media apps out there, multi-account, swapping, and that doesn't exist. There's no metrics. There's a lot of things. but it's version 1. It's like early days of this. And like I just mentioned, I think they even released it a bit early just to get it out there and take advantage of the timing. And so therefore, I'm sure maybe even more was planned for the initial release, but it's not here yet. But I think what I've noticed that's interesting is there is this kind of sense from people that they are just feeling it out, and they're trying to get a sense for what you were just talking about, Carey, which is, what is this place for on social media? Because they're not all for the same thing. They don't have the same feel. They don't have the same people. People are coming from a different point of view. I think, especially with this one coming from Instagram for the most part, we're used to scrolling through pictures and feeds and reels and videos and things like that. This is a different experience. What are those people going to come here to do? Obviously, there's a big rush, and I think it'll taper off because people who don't care about text aren't going to hang around. But I'm just watching people feel it out and figure it out together. People are actively asking the question, what should I post here? What do you, as my audience, want to see from me here?
Yes.
And architects are doing that too. One that I follow recently launched his own firm. I'll give him a shout out, Josh Mings, who started Aggregate Studio in Chicago. And he's like, what do you want to see from me here? And on Twitter, he posts about brutalism. He posts about equity. He posts about architectural topics. And so I responded, I would love, because he just started a studio, I would love to see process. I would love to see this place be about your design process, the things that you go through on your projects. I don't know why I said that, but I just thought, like, you're starting a new studio. This is what I've been doing for the last decade, is like on ArchiSpeak, on our podcast, talking about what it's like to be an architect. That's behind the scenes. It's process. It's about how do we do what we do and why do we do what we do, not here's what we did kind of a thing.
Yes.
So I don't know. It's just fun to kind of watch people figure it out. And there's no single answer either about the kinds of things that are going to go there. But like you said, Carey, what's your brand strategy, maybe what fits. And the difference between strategy and tactics here, people are trying to figure out, so the saying, I think, is tactics are knowing what to do when doing what you need to do when you know what you need to do. And strategy is doing what you need to do, not knowing. So it's thinking farther out. Sure. And so tactics, I think, fall into like the social media posting and what you're going to post and is it on brand and all those things. But the strategy is, who do you want to be out there?
Yes. And why do they care about what you're posting?
Why should they care?
Yes. Yeah. Are you adding value? And our advice is always looking at all of the platforms and seeing what really makes sense. Where's your audience? Where should you invest the most time and money? There has to be, some return on investment, and not dilute the other channels. Like, you really, have to make sure your top channels with your biggest audience are strongest.
Yeah, you can't be everywhere all the time. And it doesn't make sense to pick all social media channels to post stuff in when you have to kind of figure out where your audience is, what they want to know about, so that you can add value, like you said. And so I think a lot of times, like, start with one or two and just stick to that and see what works over time there before you go somewhere else, because you really shouldn't post the same thing on Twitter as you do to Instagram, as you do on LinkedIn. And because then it's just like, why follow somebody if you're just going to see the same stuff? Where do you guys see the architectural community or the AEC community in social online?
Yeah. LinkedIn for sure, for B2B. And we've definitely worked within other industries. And we've noticed that by far the AEC industry is super strong on LinkedIn. And it's awesome because you can really, nail down your audience, and especially with, the press that Lauren gets. And then we spread that out on social. And so all of the tagging, mostly everyone, 99% of the people are on there. Whereas Instagram, you're like, all right, they're on it. I'm trying to find this one. I can't find, this one they're not on. And, but LinkedIn, it's for sure. And
you find that a lot of thought leaders are there too, right? So the decision makers, when you're trying to attract new clients, new business, win new projects.
Definitely.
think
And
that,
it's about work, right?
Yes.
And like
It's
that
about
is a social network about work and the
Yes.
things that people do at work. And whereas like my Instagram is definitely not about work at all. It's like I go play in the mountains, I go
Yeah.
play in the
Yeah.
forest, I like to do all those kinds of things. And that's my place to post those kinds of things. And I think that also makes sense because it kind of ties into its Facebook roots in that way, right? Which is like me and my family and my close friends. And it's not like a public social network that's just like Twitter was, who's anybody can read your tweets, right? Very different.
Yeah.
LinkedIn is I agree that it's where people hang out, but the engagement is super low, I think, compared to most other social networks, at least from my experience. And there's a lot of lurkers out there who might scroll through feeds, but they're not engaging very much. What is your experience with that? And maybe why? Why do you think it's like that?
Sure. We do find that people get definitely more engagement than companies on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we try to be really strategic with, the leadership sharing certain things and getting, a lot of eyes and reposting and, that sort of thing.
It does seem like when you have the reposting happening, when you have the eyeballs looking at stuff, what's going to stop somebody from just continuing to scroll, right? What are those kinds of things that you're putting on there that somebody will take the time to read, that will take the time to look at? I'm just curious from your point of view, how you guys strategize that with your clients, because I assume you're successful at that, but I think a lot of people struggle with that. They don't want to just post like where Twitter is. It's literally a real-time feed of information. I think LinkedIn is a lot more considered, and people are taking time to figure out what they're going to post ahead of time. So again, kind of a different strategy there. But how do you get people to stop and look at what you're doing on there? What do you guys have as kind of your secret recipes for that you're going to share with this audience about like just some general things that people could use to get people to pay attention to what they're doing?
I think it goes back to our PR approach. So Lauren can share how she tells the story through PR, and then we take those media clips and all sorts of articles and podcasts, and we spread them out on social. So there's constantly, a hook.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So we found over the years, I think that many companies, if they have social or PR, social sometimes is handled by Sally in accounting, and she's wearing many other hats, and she's not really trained as social. And a lot of companies will call her, the social girl. I was actually in a meeting one time, and this guy in construction said, we have a social girl. And I said, well, you'll never call us social girls. That is not what you're buying when you partner with us. We have 45 years of experience, and we've worked with global brands, and we've been trained in this. But what we found is that, getting your foot in the door with one or the other is a great approach. I think starting with social or PR, if you can't make the jump with with both at the same time, is a great way to get your foot in the door. But then adding on that second service, whether it be, PR first and then social, or social and then PR, really does help to move the needle, because the way that we look at PR, for me, press has evolved so much over the last 20 plus years since I got into it. It used to be all about print media, and that has evolved then evolved into digital media. And for us now, as you know, Evan, because I work with you often, working with podcasts and using them as an arm of our PR strategy has been really pivotal in our strategies, because our clients who are quite comfortable usually speaking and conversing, but sometimes maybe not as comfortable writing, doing a written interview or having to respond to questions in that way. And if we can hear it from the horse's mouth and then take that messaging and spread it out on social, 35 minutes of their time on a podcast, 45 minutes on a podcast becomes timeless content. And usually that then Carey can take for months and sometimes years to come by doing flashback clips of what are the key tenets of this brand, what makes us different, why is my approach, why should you partner with us instead of somebody else? And then that becomes, fodder on social. And we can sometimes, podcasts in particular, will do like you, both video and then audio. So we have lots of different options in terms of what we do with the content, and how Carey kind of manipulates that on social and how she rolls it out. So we found that this approach of doing both really provides a great outlet for our clients to amplify their stories, their leaders, the people behind their brands. For one of our clients in particular, we have a whole campaign about the people. Carey does a video campaign. She can talk a little more about that, but it's really getting more of the company involved. And every brand is different. So, you know, what we rotate on social and what we prioritize on a, you know, from a PR lens changes based on the company. So, you know, one client, it's all about, you know, tech and the company culture, and then the faces behind the brand and how are they moving the needle in this very traditional industry. And that's what we're constantly pulsing out. And it's a momentum game. It takes time to shift the needle, especially if you've been quiet or quiet for a bit, or maybe you've always been quiet. You know, it's kind of like putting building blocks together, and you stack them up and you start to really see the traction. We started with one client almost a year ago. And I think at the time the company was 4 years old, and she just hit her 5-year anniversary. And we started with PR and she added social in. And her results are off the charts now because we've consistently been building. And then either people reach out to her directly or they reach out to me and say, hey, I saw her on this. Would she be open to doing X, Y, and Z? And you can see how the momentum really starts to build.
And I think, you know, our strategy is intentional too. We do a lot of work behind the scenes as groupies, and we, you know, spend months coming up with brand pillars for each brand. So, you know, you could also call it buckets of, you know, content, but, you know, the number one thing is the face of the brand, really identifying, you know, which leader, which leaders, is it, you know, the partner, the C-suite, who will we be promoting? And they each can talk to something different. They each have different angles. So we rotate, you know, that one is, you know, he's one, you know, is the architect, the other is an entrepreneur, you know, the other one is a mom. So there's all different angles we can approach. And then, you know, the next pillar is the product and services. And we really are always evolving that. You know, if our client is leaning more towards healthcare or hospitality, or all of a sudden, you know, the industrial space took off, we're going to make sure that we prioritize, you know, that content to keep it fresh in their feed. And then the other one's location, you know, making sure that people know you work beyond the tri-state area, you're national, and continuing to do that. And when we say brand pillars, it's not like we just do, you know, a quick one-liner. We'll do a video and we give the of the employees, and we call it, you know, we have a special series that's under a minute, and we'll give them talking points. Okay, I want you to drop the word national, you know, we're a national firm. I want you to talk about healthcare because we're pushing that. So we organically really work to get that key messaging into all different, you know, forms of media. And then our favorite pillar is the wow factor, the fourth pillar. Like, what sets them apart? You know, do they have a podcast? What are they doing outside of the office? You know, thinking about things that really make people stop and say, wow, you know, and coming up with cool content. One of our clients, you know, asks, what annoys you about architects? And that's a great question. We have timeless, you know, content, and that's from the Anti-Architect. But how cool is that to, you know, to put that out? And you have so many different answers from these industry icons, you know, sharing what annoys them. So it's kind of cool in a way to, you know, manipulate those quotes and things like that. But we constantly rotate it. So it's not project. It's, you know, people, interview, podcast, wow factor. So that's kind of our approach. But there's a lot of work that goes into that behind the scenes.
And those wow factors are great for the storytelling aspect too. You know, we have a CEO who has multiple albums on Spotify. We have a CFO who's a best-selling author on Amazon, and she founded a school in Nigeria. We have another client that grew up in Alaska, and she played D1 soccer. So all those types of things, when we're humanizing these people to make them not just an architect or an engineer, when I'm telling their story for PR, I think those are the types of things within the first couple sentences of my pitch to somebody really make them more interesting.
And real. I think that
Real,
it's
right?
not
Yeah.
just the polished version of them that's being
No,
put
yeah.
out. And
Perfect sentences put together.
yeah,
The
it's all
elevator pitch.
wordsmithed and
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
like that kind of thing is it's interesting now, even with tech like ChatGPT, where well, I can kind of notice that it's ChatGPT
Yeah.
because so many people are using it, and
Yeah.
it's interesting to just see people rely on things like that when it is so much more comfortable to tell your own story in your own words and not worry about them all being perfect and not worry like you're a real human and you do things that you're really interested in, and sharing those I think is where social media kind of all began, right? It's like, there used to be a prompt on Twitter and on Facebook. It's like, what are you doing right now? It was something like that, right? That's not exactly it, but it was like, what are you up to? And so just to prompt you, because it was like, no, what are you up to right now and in the moment? And when you open up the app to use it, what are you doing and why? I think is really interesting.
This episode is sponsored by Confluence. I've invited Randall Stevens, the CEO of Avail, to tell you about it.
In 2019, we held the inaugural Confluence event, which was designed to bring together the product managers, the technology developers that are working on the products used daily in the AEC industry, and put them in the room with the design technology leaders from the practice side that are actually implementing and using these technologies. The goal isn't to sell anybody anything at these events. The goal is to get a better understanding of what's working, what's not working, and what would be the best products to develop to be implemented in the AECO industry. We've held these 3-day Confluence events the past 4 years and attracted over 100 attendees. We have an exciting agenda plan for our annual event in October. The theme this year is going to be focused around AI and machine learning and its applications in the AEC industry. You can learn more about Confluence at getavail.com/confluence.
I want to talk about measurement. So you guys talk about measuring the ROI and things like that. And you have to build over time. You have to build momentum. You have to build the brand. You have to build the message. You have to build the story and all these different buckets to that. But I think a lot of people also maybe get frustrated with a lack of being able to measure the response to that because there's a huge number of people who won't hit the like button, who won't leave a comment, right? Okay, normal. So, but to recognize that there are people beyond the ones who are doing those things. Sure. But then I think what really matters in the whole measurement thing, because what I'm not interested in talking about is like, how many followers do you have, like the vanity metrics side of things. But I'm interested in what opportunities have you seen social and PR create for the people that are working with you? Because to me, they have decided, they've chosen themselves to say, I'm going to go out and do something beyond the normal way of addressing audience or getting the word out about what we do. And on some level, they could even be creating a new persona for themselves or a different perspective that nobody else has to set themselves apart. Because there's this idea that on social media, you have to have a big audience for it to be worth doing. And audiences, like you just said, take time to build. You have to build the stuff, build over time. I'm just wondering like where you guys see all that and just take that and run with what I just spilled out onto the table here. What are you thinking about when I say all that stuff?
Yeah, I think it's a lot more than numbers, followers. Lately we've seen talent acquisition be a huge part of social media. People talk about going to the company's social channels as the first thing to see if they want to work for that company. So for, maintaining talent, and finding the best talent, we've found that's huge. So that's something worth it as well. The other thing is, it does take time, and Lauren can give examples of clients. Maybe they get on one podcast that leads to a panel, that leads to a keynote, and then it just spirals from there. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's a momentum game. But, the clients are like, I'd love Lauren to share that story because
I know there's so many
it's not
examples
about,
like that.
the numbers. It's about, how they feel business is, growing, and, people give them feedback, even on the golf course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, sometimes our clients say, oh, we don't want to, we're asked the same questions on all the podcasts. We have to do it again. We're like, yes, you do. You got to get out there again, because that one niche audience on that podcast, they might not have heard your story. They might not have heard the other dozen that you've already done. And so if you can connect with a few different people there, or they happen to catch the clip that Carey puts on social, that's all it takes, right? Is the one business call that leads to a new client. And one example is last summer, I had one of our presidents and owners of a company. He was part of kind of a newsletter, a very widely distributed newsletter, an interview. And that group owned an industry publication, and they ended up featuring one of the company's projects on the cover of the October issue. And then in the November issue, they interviewed the 3 people running the firm to talk about company culture. And then in February, they invited the CFO to be part of a female-driven symposium that they did in Texas. And this September, they do a much larger annual event for huge people in the industry. And they've tapped that same CFO to come in and be the opening keynote, actually, for the event. And that was all just from one, newsletter, Q&A interview. And
but you guys are masterminds. You planned that all out in advance. You saw the whole roadmap.
Too. I forgot. They've been on multiple, episodes of their podcast, but it all just led from, I think that is where you buy into the bigger strategy and people that have the expertise for decades. It kind of goes back to the notion of not having, Sally in accounting doing your social and PR. And I think that's, having had the training to say, okay, this could just be this, but what else do you, are there other opportunities? Are there other people I should meet within your organization? Literally, I asked that question, and I was introduced to the senior writer at the magazine. And then I was also introduced to the guy that hosts the podcast. And then I was introduced to the president of the company who was putting together all the programming for these major industry events. And so I think sometimes, making the investment in more of a senior team, as opposed to, it's for our team, it's nice we have the balance of, people that are fresh out of school with that, kind of that perspective. And then for us, knowing how to kind of navigate the business world on a day-to-day basis and have those more senior conversations.
I made the joke that you had foreseen that whole roadmap of all those dots getting connected, but of course you didn't, right? Because these opportunities, these opportunities present themselves because you are in doing the thing. And I can raise my hand and say that has happened throughout my career as well, because starting a podcast in 2012 was not a thing that everybody did back then, right? And the opportunities that came from that have, just like the story that you shared, it's been like that. And I think that it's really interesting to, that this is one of those things where it's when should you start social media? And it's yesterday, right?
Yes.
Yes.
100%. The algorithms aren't getting there.
You can't wait for the opportunity. You can't wait for these things to happen because you're not ready yet, or you haven't. There is actually no barrier to entry. And so something you said early on in the conversation, Carey, you talked about this on brand and the quality, and Lauren, you mentioned quality over quantity.
Yes.
And then there's the other side. There's the Gary V.
Yes.
Who's just, you got to put out 50 posts a day on every single channel and be helpful, and just share your story, share what, and obviously that is Gary Vaynerchuk. Yes. That is how Gary Vaynerchuk is wired, right? Yes, and so
that's
easy for him to tell other people to be like that, right? Yes. But at the same time, it's a different strategy, and it can work for somebody too. So I'm just interested from your perspective. You guys are building brands on social and PR in a specific way, and the message that you're conveying is kind of built around that as well. But there are other ways to do it, right? And they're not necessarily wrong.
Yeah,
the biggest difference is the B2B versus B2C, right? So we spent 20 years in that B2C world, in the fashion world, where you needed to sell the dress and the blazer and the shoes. There was
sale was going on, and the
hustling,
events,
the register ringing, right? And
Yeah.
We love B2B. I mean, this is, our next chapter was very intentional in terms of, why we slid into B2B, because I think it really is more quality over quantity.
Yeah.
You're trying to build awareness and build the momentum, but it can be done thoughtfully and strategically. And it's not a more is more approach. And that's what we found, I think. Right, Carey?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, it is it's like, where do you spend your time? You could go all out and spend you could spend 24/7, but it's also knowing who our audience is. And, we really like to say we go above and beyond. For example, like if our client does an event, we see a photo with the sponsors and we zoom in and we tag every single sponsor. We make sure that we go that extra mile. We engage with, journalists and podcast hosts who work in the industry. We have lists of our clients, clients and their partners, and we engage with them on LinkedIn. So we're really intentional to go deep, we would say, and that's how we like to work to really move the needle, I guess.
Lauren, you mentioned what it was Sally's title. Social girl?
Sally in accounting.
Sally in
and someone said Sally's an older name. You need to have Emma or something right out of school.
Well, I think
there's tons of, there's so many people we go to, meetings, and there's so many people, I think, within the industry, especially when they're, decades old brands, they're frustrated because, they used to do this and now they do something, so many new services, or they've evolved so much, but nobody knows it and they want to be known, but then, they don't want to make the investment. I think, that long-term investment, so it's really, I think there's such an opportunity in this industry to shift that perception and to showcase the value that our clients are seeing through this SOPR approach, because there's so many others out there. We walk into meetings and we say, look, you need us for everything we can give you, but that's going to be scary to you. So where do you feel comfortable starting? Just start. Because, that's how we did it with, Mancini back in the day. They hired us for one service, and then we built and we've grown with them so much over the last 6 years. And so while there's, many bigger companies that we see so much opportunity to help immediately and really make an immediate impact, we're happy to kind of meet them where they are. And we are looking for a few more brands. And we also, I think because we came from the industry that we did, we also have a very interesting checklist of, we want to work with kind people.
Yes.
We want them to really trust us and see the value. And we can kind of tell now, we've done enough meetings where, we can tell if they're kind of in or they're, skeptical. And, I think that's going to be a shift over time that we'll see in the years to come.
Yeah.
I bring up Sally because Carey, what you were talking about, going deep and kind of having the diligence to go through and tag all the companies that you see the logos for. And I want to draw a picture here for the audience who might be interested in hearing about this social PR approach and like what a company like yours does in this regard is like, it's more than a full-time job. And
oh my gosh.
That to me is what this is not new for the audience who listens to this show, because firms who are doing it the way they've always done it and aren't looking for technology solutions to solve their problems. The people who listen to the show know that feeling very well, right? Which is, no, like, I'm not going to be a typical project manager. I'm going to leverage technology where I can do the same work as 10 people or more, or I can do that thing that took 2 hours in 2 seconds and it's not different than what's going on in social media, where it's not just one person in the corner trying to figure out what to post, but the life of a social media manager and that position, if like we should call it one, because like literally that's what firms actually need, is that position that's dedicated, or they need to hire somebody like you to do it for them, because you understand the industry and you have that long history to be able to bring the wisdom to the table. I just want to draw that distinction or that contrast, because it's like you said, the construction company says, oh yeah, Sally in accounting does that. And it's like, that's just an add-on thing that we do every once in a while, and it's not important.
Yes.
Is what really comes across there. And
Yeah,
it
is.
that's not this at all, right? That and I think it's so interesting from a brand strategy point of view to get that message across for people to hear.
Absolutely. Yes. And now, as you see, it's great. When Reels came about, it's like, okay, we need, a video producer. We need, we've hired copywriters before, and now, everything we do is in-house, but we do have our partners, and it's like where to, where to invest to keep the quality high. But it's like you really have to have that, standard, that high quality as well, and mix it up. But, it's a whole production. It really is.
Yeah, it is. It's intense. And I think like I can barely keep my head above water, and I don't feel like I post enough stuff out there. And at the same time, I'm like, I'm sick of posting stuff, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going
You do a
I
great
can't
job.
actually
You
post.
do. You're on it.
I try to automate as much of it as I can just to be totally transparent with the audience.
Yes.
And I mean, that's kind of obvious too, right? Like it's a podcast title and a link. And I do leverage technology to do a lot of that for me. But at the same time, like I want to engage with the people who want to engage with it.
Yeah.
And I want to do that personally. And I want to have conversations with people, whether they matter or not. Like they're, what that's in air quotes, like whether it's like what, I don't care what we talk about. Let's just make a connection. And I think that's one of the most interesting things about social media. And I know I've told this story before, but maybe somebody's hearing it for the first time right now, which is when I started the ArcaSpeak podcast with my co-hosts back in 2012, we only did it over Twitter. We created a podcast on Twitter. I had never met them in person until 3 years after we started.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Wow. That's incredible.
And so we're in three very different locations, never had the opportunity to get together until we did. And just to point out that like, that's how the world is nowadays.
Yeah.
Like I have listeners around the world. I talk to people on this podcast from around the world. I mean, it's incredible, and we're all connected now. It's a very different world to practice the things that we do in the built environment, and to get the word out, and to tell our story, and to share our value and our values with other people than it ever was before. And so just to kind of say, Sally's interested in that, and she can do that sometimes, or she can do it on her lunch break, right? She can do it off hours for us. You're just leaving so much on the table there. And if you decide to leave it on the table, so be it, right? Yeah. That's fine. That's a decision that you can totally make. But I think what you're pointing out is the opportunities that have come from putting things out there in these new ways. It's so funny that we keep talking about them as new ways.
I know.
It isn't even new anymore, right? So I don't know. I don't know where that's really going, but it is interesting to kind of just draw the distinction between the person who's doing it on their spare time versus this being like, I'm sure that when Threads came out, like you said, everyone's like freaking out.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
How do we deal with this? How do we deal with another one?
I know.
Because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is. And I think, what Lauren's found is getting our guests on podcasts is really a great avenue for sure. For PR, which has evolved, through the years. So even just that service alone.
Yeah. And you guys Christian has been on the show, Christian Giordano, and you talked about that. Where did that idea come from? Does that come from Brand Groupies?
Christian being a guest?
Oh, no.
The
starting
launching
the podcast.
his podcast.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So I started the Brand Groupies podcast. It was 2018, not as early as you. And so that was something that, we had always felt comfortable with. We felt, we were in it feeling like, 2018 was early on. And then we kept saying to him, he was really interested in building his personal brand. And we kept saying, you should do a podcast. And then I guess it was 2021, he said, all right, let's do this. And we helped come up with a name, and it had to be, catchy. And we just found that we, from our own experience with the Brand Groupies podcast, it just checks off so many boxes. You invest that, hour or so of time, and of course you can invite guests on who could be potential clients, and they share it. It's a co-promotional thing. In fashion, we always did co-promotions and partnerships. We loved, partnerships, because then that would, expose you to new audiences when they, you co-promoted with someone else. And so it made so much sense, and we're just so excited that it took off.
Yeah.
It's been really fun. Everybody's always buzzing about the name and
Yes.
asking him questions, and everybody at the firm, why is it called the Anti-Architect? Does he not like architects? And
I called him out on that clickbait title.
Yes.
Like the first thing we talked about on this show.
Totally.
And
it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, obviously it just it starts a conversation, right?
Yes,
and
there you go.
And then somebody finds out that he's actually an architect, and it's like, what do you mean? Like, and there's like there's just this conflict, inner conflict that just comes out, and it just like, hey, we could talk about this. That's kind of fun. Makes it fun. And there's no pressure there. It's just it's very cool.
This episode is brought to you this week by Troxel Plus membership. You should become a Troxel Plus member today. Members get some great perks. For instance, you get an ad-free version of the podcast and the show notes, and you can listen to your ad-free feed in whatever podcast app you already use. You'll also get the show notes sent directly to your inbox without ads, which includes all of the links to what we talk about during the episodes, so you'll never miss a thing. The biggest thing about becoming a member is that you'll be directly supporting the reason this show exists, which is to capture long-form conversations with my guests from the architectural community and beyond to have a positive impact on the present and future of the profession. The ad market is pretty bad right now. The podcast would not exist without our members. And for those of you who are one, I am very thankful. So for those of you who are hearing this on the public feed, I hope you'll consider it. For a limited time, there's a special launch offer at trxl.co/launch20. You can check that link in the show notes to get a nice discount if you sign up for the annual membership option. That's trxl.co/launch20, no spaces in there, for a limited time. I'm so thankful for our members, and I hope you'll become one of them.
So with that podcast and with your podcast and things like that, everybody has a podcast nowadays, right? But I think that, some of the stats that I've heard about podcasts are something like 4.5 million podcasts that have been started. There's like 800,000 plus that are actually kind of continually moving along, and very few make it past 10 episodes.
Yes.
And so just to speak to kind of the dedication of social media, podcasting, putting out, I hate to actually even use the word content. I've probably said it a couple times in this episode, but I don't think that's really it kind of genericizes it, right? And so the idea of putting things out there and doing it consistently is important. Can you guys talk to that component of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched, and for him, we manage several podcasts, and every kind of the cadence of each one is different based on, the host's time, really. So we launched one podcast for a client every other week. We do Christians every 3 weeks. And then with Christian, from a social perspective, we put out a teaser sometimes like the day before. We're launching one tomorrow. So we put a teaser out today on social. Tomorrow, the launch graphic will go up, and then we'll do 2 clips all in the next 3 weeks before we launch the next guest. And we will take a hiatus every now and then, sometimes around the holidays or social. We're going up tomorrow to record 2 more episodes with him. But it's been really fun to see it evolve. We've had such an array of guests on. We've had his clients, some of his partners. We're in the midst of a series right now doing very recognizable architects, like Brad Perkins' episode launches tomorrow, and Ozzie Nelson, and just really some leaders within the industry that have inspired him. And so it's just a fun way to, first of all, no one ever says no to being on a podcast, right? When you send out an invite, almost no. I don't think anyone's ever said no to us. It's such a fun way to get to know somebody's story. Yep. And then I think from a business perspective, it can really, for him and we're doing the same. We just launched an AEC Buzzmakers series talking to people like us who are behind the brands and finding out what are the trends in the industry? What are people seeing? What are they budgeting for? What's working for them for, are they doing anything for personal branding for the C-suite? Are they prioritizing social or PR or both? And so that's been really fun for us to start to kind of peel back the onion and have a different kind of conversation with people within the industry that do things that are similar to what we do.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. It's so across the board. Like we said in fashion, you had your PR agency. It was very, standard. And now it's just, you're like, wow, everyone's doing different things. And so what's working, what's better, and really getting behind the scenes has been eye-opening.
Yeah. So to maybe bring this back full circle, this whole idea of storytelling, and you're talking about kind of the characters in the industry. I think that's kind of how I think about it, especially with podcasts like one of the ones that I do, Peopleverse, right? It's about telling the person's story and opening them up to other people in the building industry, because I think something that we've identified that's lacking in the building industry, especially as the march of technology goes on, is further and further disconnection. We search for information. We don't seek out a person to get the lowdown. We don't seek out a person to get their wisdom. And this industry is full of people with decades of experience and wisdom. And that's where I think this all ties together, right? The purpose of this is not just to talk about our projects, but it's to talk about people's experiences. It could be the people in the firm's experience in the industry. It could be the client's experiences with architecture or the built environment. And both of those are really valuable for winning new projects, for the people behind the brands and creating opportunities and all of those things. Maybe we'll just finish it up there with like this whole, like the power of storytelling and like what that all comes back to. Why is that so important to you guys? Because you're brand groupies, like the whole idea of being groupies for the rock stars, following the rock stars around as they do their tours and setting up the merch table and doing whatever. I think that is such a fun tie-in that you've created with your own branding there. Like, what is it about AEC and telling the stories of AEC that really kind of brings all that home for you?
I know. I think it's, we always say, be the Mick Jagger of your industry. I think early on in Brand Groupies, we would get so excited about what our clients were doing, like even more excited than them. We're like, oh my gosh, you're doing this. I can't believe it. And we were like,
That's normal.
Just really passionate. And like I said, that's where groupies really came from, because we're like, we can do this, we can do that. And, it's so many ideas of how to get their message out there. But I think, the storytelling is so important. I talked to, some major social media people, and they're hiring PR people now to manage social, like big social accounts, because you need to have that storytelling mindset. That's where we came from. And we see, the whole picture. That's why PR makes so much sense, because now social is, they're kind of, the boundary is kind of not black and
blurred.
white. It's blurred.
Yeah.
That's the word. So putting it together and just being a well-oiled machine, the perception, the story just continues to, remain out there and get into people's subconscious, I guess.
Well, Lauren, last bit of news here. You shared some news with me, and I just wanted to acknowledge it. I mean, congratulations.
Thank you so much. You're so sweet. Thank you. Thank
president,
you.
That at Brand Groupies. And so you two are leading an amazing effort there. And I think that it's pretty obvious if anybody pays attention to what's going on in AEC with social and PR, that you're doing an absolutely wonderful job. And to me, it's just more about pointing out that that's possible for anybody out there who wants to do it. You do kind of have to figure out how to add it in. It maybe there are things you can stop doing, right? And so that you can create the space to go in this direction. But to kind of bring it back to maybe where we started with AEC not being very good at this, about telling our story. And like you just said, Carey, it's like you had more excitement for what was going on than they do. And I think that's normal. That's the grind. I mean, that is the grind of AEC, which is like, I got to get through this project because I got another
Sure.
project to start so
Right.
that I can get through that project to
Yeah.
start another project.
Yes.
And like taking the step back, getting the bigger perspective and actually telling those cool stories. Like there's so many stories that I've been able to share on the ArcaSpeak podcast over the years when I was working on projects and the things that clients would say and the experiences that they would have, and just share that with me. And then I could share it with everybody. I think that was really a fun thing. And for people, everybody has those experiences, but it's really hard to kind of step back and then figure out a way to tell that story because my life is full of all this
Right.
other stuff. And so you guys take that work off of the hands of a lot of people. You really help hold their hand and help them do that. But I do hope that our industry gets better at this because it is such a valuable industry. And I think the perception out there is different than what we have of it internally, of what we think the value is. And we have to ask ourselves if it's worth telling that story. I think the answer is yes, but then, okay, what are you going to do about it? And that's where people like Brand Groupies, where Carey and Lauren come in. So you guys are doing great work. It's
Thank you
wonderful.
very
Much,
much.
Evan.
Thank you for having us.
Honor to be
This
on.
was fun to be on this side.
On this side, right?
Yes. So you can invite me to be on your podcast, and then
Yes.
I can have that. I'll sit on the other side.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
exactly.
Yes, I'm sure.
All right, guys. Thank you so
Aw.
much.
Thank you so
Evan.
much,
Good to see you.
Evan.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to our members this week. Find out how you can become a member at trxl.co. And I'll talk to you again next week.